Hi, this is Jim Lobaito, and I'm president and founder of a company called Performance Group. You're listening to the podcast version of a program that originally aired on the BizTalk Radio Show. I started BizTalk so you'd have access to today's leading experts about growing your company and yourself. BizTalk is produced by Performance Group. At Performance Group, we work at the front end of a company's revenue stream. We find the salespeople who generate the revenue, and we provide onboarding programs that get them doing that sooner. Our passion is aligning talent with opportunity. That's why we're known as a Salesforce development company. Enjoy the program. I was in a conversation with the company president the other day, and I wonder if you have these same feelings. He expressed to me that he feels like he's the only one committed inside his organization to moving forward. He feels like he's carrying his company on his back. He feels like he's out front dragging everybody off into their future. And I was just curious, is he the only one who feels that way, or do you sometimes get those feelings? So what is it about gaining commitment that seems to be so difficult, yet everything that we want? You ever been inside those companies or those organizations where you can just see everybody's happy with what they're doing? They're enthusiastic about supporting and working with you, and they're doing more than just their job. They're actually there to service and help you. You know, I get that experience whenever I go inside an Apple retail store. Everybody there is having fun. Everybody's there to help. And they have great product knowledge, but more important than that, they're able to explain to you how those instruments and tools and computers and devices really help you in what you're trying to get done. And I think they have the patience of Job sometimes because it's, you know, they're very technical at what they do. And sometimes us as consumers going in don't really have their expertise. But they never really have an air of arrogance about it when you work with them. Imagine having that experience with your customers, with your clients, not just with you, but everybody inside your organization. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. Our guest is Jantsch. We're talking about his book, The Commitment Engine, Making Work Worth It. You may know John from his best-selling book, Duct Tape Marketing. So stay tuned. I think you'll find what John has to say very enlightening. Before we get to that, a couple of resources to remind you of. You can go out to our BizTalkRadioShow.com website. That's right, BizTalkRadioShow.com website. And you can download podcasts of all of our previous programs. Those are also available through iTunes. Other resources out on that website, you'll find key insights, one of them being Sales Quick Coach, 2-minute timeouts to improve your performance. If you're in sales, you want to look that up. Even more importantly, you want to subscribe to it. We take a real-world sales situation every week and give you insights on how to deal with those situations. Our other blog is Hire the Best, insights on hiring A players in today's marketplace. So if you're a hiring manager and you're looking for key insights and what it takes to find great talent, you'll find some information on the blog, Hire the Best. Follow us on Twitter at BizTalk1040, and also you'll find us out on Facebook. We're talking to Jantsch about his book, The Commitment Engine, Making Work Worth It. And that's really about gaining commitment from employees inside your organization currently. I want to talk for just a second about recruiting, how to gain commitment from a candidate before you make them a formal job offer. You know, too often I see companies make a mistake of issuing a job offer and then having the candidate think about it, or even worse, taking that offer and shopping it to their current employer, trying to get a better deal from them, or shopping it to someone else who's trying to hire them. And now you're stuck in this nowhere's land trying to get a decision and force commitment. And I contend you can get that commitment before you make a formal job offer. To do that, there are 3 specific questions you can ask your candidate prior to making them a job offer. And here are those 3 questions. Are you in position to accept the job offer you're about to receive? Who else do you need to run this offer by? And when you have done that in the past, how have they responded? Because everybody tells you they need to run it by their significant other or their spouse, whatever it is. But this is not the first time they've had a job offer, so I'm assuming they've talked about the interviews they've been on. I'm assuming they've talked about the opportunity. So I just want to know, what have they talked about? Why are these 3 questions so important? Well, one of the hardest questions to answer in your life is, what do I want to do? We fear answering that question because we fear committing to something that could be a mistake. It's also human nature to be curious to see what you have to offer. That's why you hear people respond to your recruiting calls with, well, I'm always open to hear what you have to offer, or I'd be crazy not to see what else is out there for me. One way you can stop the tire kickers and people just shopping around is actually have a process you put them through and tell them what that process is. You see, people won't go through a process if they're not truly committed to making a job change. And making that decision to make a change is the first decision they have to make even before you get to them. So have people made that decision that they're ready for a career move. You can read more about this on my blog post, How to Gain Commitment Before You Make a Formal Job Offer, out on our website, BizTalkRadioShow.com, and under the blog, Hire the Best. Let's get to our guest, John Jantsch. On our program tonight is John Jantsch. He is a marketing consultant, speaker, and best-selling author of Duct Tape Marketing and Referral Engine. He is the creator of Duct Tape Marketing System and Duct Tape Marketing Consultants Network that trains and licenses small business marketing consultants around the world. His blog was chosen as Forbes magazine's favorite for marketing and small business, and his podcast, a top 10 marketing show on iTunes, was called a must-listen-to by Fast Company magazine. His practical take on small business is often cited as a resource in publications such as the Wall Street Journal and New York Times. Today, we're talking to John about his book, The Commitment Engine, Making Work Worth It. John, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me.
John, you're known as a marketing consultant. Your best-selling book, Duct Tape Marketing, is a must-read, and the Referral Engine talks about... John, you're known as a marketing consultant. Your book, Duct Tape Marketing, and the Referral Engine are must-reads in terms of growing a business. That's more of external, promoting the business. Now you turn around and write a book called The Commitment Engine, Making Work Worth It, which is more of an internal look at a business. Why does a marketing person write a book about work?
Well, it's actually been a bit of an evolution. So the first book, as you said, straight up, marketing system. It was my attempt to kind of document the process for small business. And then my second book was actually called The Referral Engine. And again, that area of marketing, if you will, is certainly a significant way for a lot of organizations to grow their businesses. And so I wanted to cover that in that book. And frankly, in doing that, one of the things I did was I talked to a lot of organizations that had raving fans and that willingly referred and introduced and talked about their companies and their products and services. And so it was kind of almost an evolution from there to say, okay, what do these companies do internally to really kind of create that kind of commitment? It's certainly well beyond just having a nice marketing engine and a systematic approach to referrals. And so that was really what I was set out to do was to try to figure out what these companies do to create that kind of commitment in their customers and their fans. And, frankly, I thought I was really just going to write about something that they do internally. And what I quickly found is that these companies that had raving fans also had raving employees, people that they loved what they did. They were an extension, if you will, of the thinking of the owner of the business, and then backed up kind of to the owner of the business, and found that many of these businesses that had these high commitment communities and raving fans also had a real single-minded. There was extreme clarity about why they did what they did, and I think that was probably the biggest. I wouldn't say surprise. It just wasn't what I necessarily went looking for, but there was this definite theme that the owner of the business had extreme clarity about why they do what they did and what their kind of higher purpose was. They attracted a staff that really believed in that same thing, and then the community, the raving fans of community, were almost a natural outcome of that. And so that's really the thread that runs through that entire book.
John, you talk about the clarity that these small to medium-sized businesses need, and I bet you find that level of clarity is not necessarily high in most companies.
Yeah, I think what happens a lot of times, people go into business because they think they have an idea. They worked at an accounting firm, so they started an accounting firm. So they really go into that business. Really, I think the initial thought is we're going to get customers, we're going to deliver this product or service to customers, and in a lot of cases, the way we see everybody else doing it. And I think that what I'm trying to suggest in this book, and it's actually really, it's not like you just go lock yourself in a room one day and come out with your, crystal clear picture of what your, higher purpose is for your business. It kind of evolves as you grow your business or attempt to grow your business. And I cite some, and I'll share with you, if you like, some examples of, companies where purpose and clarity actually kind of finds them. And I think that that's probably the more typical path that people really get jazzed about. Hey, you know what? Here's what we're really doing in this business or with this business, and we're gonna make that our single-minded purpose. And I think that's I intentionally use the word clarity. One of the things I'm really suggesting is that you really do have to simplify this. You have to really kind of find that one thing that you want people to understand, why you do what you do. And actually that then drives so many business decisions. It certainly drives your marketing message, or should, but it drives kind of everything you do, how you treat your customers, certainly how you treat your people. And I think that's the part that people really have to sort of find.
You're listening to BizTalk. Thanks for joining in on the conversation. Our guest is John Jantsch. We're talking about his book, The Commitment Engine, Making Work Worth It. John, you talk about the purpose of the business and getting clarity around that. Give us some examples of things that you have seen that have actually worked quite effectively.
One of my favorites is a janitorial services company in Cincinnati, Ohio, and the name of the company is Jantsch. And they were, hey, we started a janitorial business. We keep growing. We're doing good work. We got 50 employees, and they found that really they were having trouble getting and keeping. They were selling more work than they could actually deliver because they couldn't get and keep good people. So they decided one day that they were going to solve this people problem. So they went to the library and checked out every book they could on retention and HR, and just, they really wanted to crack this nut because they thought that's what's holding them back. And one of the nuggets they stumbled on was that you should make it easy for your employees to get to work, or remove, as many hurdles as possible. And so they went out and they bought a company shuttle, and they were going to use that shuttle to go around and pick up their employees, take them home, take them from job to job. What happened was it was really one of the first times that they'd actually gone out into the neighborhoods where their employees had lived and really seen a lot of the loss of hope and poverty that was occurring. And what they really realized is they didn't have a people problem as much as they had a dreaming problem. I mean, people don't necessarily grow up and dream about going into the janitorial services business. But what they found was the people that were really, being attracted to this level of work had really lost all their dreams. And so they had no real reason to commit to this business or any business. It was just a job, and they would take it or leave it. So they decided, here's what we're going to do for our HR move. Instead of creating, some sort of system to recruit and train and retain people, we're just going to what we're going to do is we're going to try to restore dreaming in the lives of our employees. And so they created a whole level of management. They call them dream managers, and their primary job is to help every employee identify and then go after achieving some dream. So, it might be playing a musical instrument, it might be getting a GED, sending your kid to college. I mean, it didn't matter how big or how small. That every single person had to identify and then go after a dream and work with this dream manager. And they found that it just changed everything. Once people who really had kind of lost all hope or all ability to kind of chase a dream, started getting this at their place of work, it just changed everything about their relationship with their job. And so, you fast forward to today, they have 300 employees doing, $15, $16 million in business, virtually no employee turnover. And one of the lines that Tony and Mary Miller, the owners, one of the lines that the Millers use all the time is that the thing they're the proudest of is that now Jantsch is the place that you go to work if you want to get out of the janitorial services business, because they build their people up so much that in fact, a few of them, actually, gain the confidence to go on to maybe something that is more of a career path. So they've decided that their clarity or their single-minded purpose is to make dreams come true, and they've done that, or they disguised that, I guess, as a janitorial services company. And so, when they consider things, when they consider new programs, when they talk about and communicate and even go out and pitch new business, they'll talk about that idea of making dreams come true. And it has just dramatically changed their business. And they will tell you that they are serving their higher purpose, found them. And really it was in just trying to really get this sense of how do we grow this business.
Well, what a great story, because what they're really selling then is that hope. You come to work for us. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously from a you look around the rest of the typical, what you might think of stereotypical in that business, there's very few other people that are leading with that, sense of purpose. And so it certainly attracts both customers and people to come to work for them.
So let's pretend that we have this clarity and our purpose down, and let's pretend it's meaningful and it's not as cliche as, turn a profit or get customers or, something would attract people.
Well, let me interject one thing. I know where you're headed with this, but I also want to make people aware that this doesn't have to be some sort of serving social purpose or spiritual purpose or something. I mean, the idea really around this is just being clear about what it is, why you do what you do. There's another company that I profile in the book called 37 Signals. Probably a lot of your listeners have seen their software. Basecamp is probably their biggest title of project management software. And their whole higher purpose is about creating tools that are so simple yet powerful that they completely go against everything else that's out there in the software industry. So they will tell you over and over again that they spend more time figuring out what to leave out of their software than what to put in. And that even though their software does very complex things, their entire goal is that people view it as completely intuitive, completely simple, and easy to use. The first time you open it up, you're going to know what to do next. Now, what's so cool about that is you go in their office, and it's the same way. It's very simple, almost stark in a way. Their pricing, instead of being $49.99, is $50, for a product. The way they hire people, the way their office is arranged, and how people work, all of it is around being, their sense of clarity is about simplicity in everything they do. So again, I don't want to belabor this point, but I wanted to really make sure that the distinction was there. That when I talk about higher purpose, it doesn't have to be something that we associate, say, with good. I suppose it can't be evil if you're going to last very long, but it doesn't just have to be. It can be something that's not necessarily associated with purpose even.
I think your point of the clarity of purpose, and you go back to Bill Gates' original clarity of purpose, which was a computer on every desk, in every home and every desk.
That's right.
And that drove that company for until they got to almost that point, right?
That's right.
They might be a little confused in what their purpose is today, but back in the day, that drove them a long way. And you can look at example after examples what that clarity and purpose does for people. I'll never forget. I'm old enough to remember Gulf War I, right? It happened back in '91, and people were surprised when they didn't take Saddam Hussein out of power. And I'll never forget when I think Schwarzkopf made the comment, or President Bush at the time, Bush 41 at the time, said, "No, our purpose was to go free Kuwait. This is our mission. This is we set out and attempted to do. That's what we got done. The mission done. Let's move on." So having that clarity gives you a lot of direction, and also, I venture to say, with the work that you do, John, with helping companies with their marketing stuff, that you run into a lot who don't have this clarity. So what stops us from having this clarity?
Well, I think part of it is just the noise, the swirl of activities, the never taking the time to sit there and even think that that's, a worthwhile goal because the phone's ringing or, you're just busy. And I think that, you'll see in the book, particularly in that first section you talk about, I spend a great deal of time talking about, the intentional approach to really, finding this sense of clarity, because what I've found in a lot of the companies that I feature in the book and that I interviewed and entrepreneurs that I talked to is that, a lot of the busy and, being, just crazy, no time to stop and think and analyze anything comes about from not having this clarity. Because that's one of the things it really does for you is it kind of acts as a real filter for what you should be chasing. I mean, there are more opportunities and bright, shiny objects and new things than we could ever get to. And I think that having this very clear sense of direction and purpose, and then having just a handful of priorities around, what you will do and won't do, for the year to support that purpose, is really how you kind of get rid of some of all of the extra things that are chasing you that you maybe want to consider.
How much easier is your job when you pick up a client who has that clarity?
Well, it's amazing. And a lot of times it's particularly because, I'm out there talking about this stuff all the time. So when my message resonates with somebody who either says, A, I need to get that, so, help me get that, or B, that message resonates with me. This is, these are our core beliefs. This is what we stand for, help us communicate that. Obviously that's hard. That's a much easier task than when somebody says, hey, I need some marketing, but I'm not going to bother with any of that purpose stuff because, that's just a bunch of hoo-hoo.
The touchy-feely stuff, right?
Exactly.
Our guest is John Jantsch. We're talking about his book, The Commitment Engine, Making Work Worth It. For other resources on growing yourself and your company, visit our website at BizTalkRadioShow.com. That's B-I-Z, talkradioshow.com. That's where the experts come to share their insights with you. So, John, we're talking about this clarity of purpose, and thanks for explaining that to us. So let's pretend that you have this clarity of purpose. What are some of the other elements needed that go along with this clarity that gaining commitment from everyone can actually be achieved?
Once you have it, so for example, I used either 37 Signals or Jancoa, it's obviously good to have, but now you got to bring it to life too. It has to really become part of your culture. And a lot of the ways that the companies that have been successful doing that is they think in terms of, shared beliefs in the organization. Here are the things we stand for, and not just a plaque on the wall, but here's how we're going to bring those beliefs to action. They typically plan together. They typically have a great deal of transparency so that everybody knows everybody's capable of thinking like an owner. In fact, many of the companies that I actually talked to that had what I became to call commitment engines, even had real ownership, shared ownership. But at the very least, enough autonomy and transparency and everybody knew what was going on. Everybody knew what contributed to profits. Everybody, knew in many cases the finances of the business. And it really allowed them to all think in terms of, and really share this higher purpose. And I think that's, one of the mistakes sometimes people make, and I talk to them all the time. I talk to business owners that are very driven by a sense of why they do what they do, but they don't bring that to the organization. In fact, in some cases, I think people, particularly in the case of, say, this Jancoa, imagine when they found out that, or decided to start talking about, their higher purpose to make people's dreams come true. I've got to imagine at some level in their company, at that point they had about 100 employees. There were some people that thought, well, that was just a bunch of hogwash. We need to go out and hire some people and make them work harder. And I think that, in some cases, there are people that don't want to bring that fully alive. And obviously it's got to be something that you truly believe in. You can't manufacture what our purpose should be, but the real key is you've got to find lots of ways to just infuse the entire culture with it.
I'll tell you what I dog-eared in your book for me, and it's pages 94 and 95, because this really stood out to me, and I imagine will the audience. And you're talking about, in the chapter is a culture of shared commitment.
Yeah.
And you say about get the right people, tell the story over and over, protect the standards, make meetings about action, teach and share the metrics, invest in the best tools. John, dead nuts on.
Well, thank you. And again, that came from just lots of interviews with. It came from two things: my own experience of owning a business for over 25 years now, but also just in talking to a lot of organizations and just hearing some of those repeated themes, and talking to lots of employees. I had some really great interviews where I would talk to groups of employees at companies, and they would just share with me, "Here's why we love this company. Here's why we wanted to work for this company." And I think when you start hearing that level of enthusiasm from employees at an organization, I think you have to pay attention to what that organization's doing and doing right.
And I'll go back to those 6 things, but I think you can put those on a 3x5 card, or each one of those on a 3x5 card, shuffle them through, one a week, one a month, whatever. You could spend the rest of your career trying to get those 6 things right. Because when you get it to a different one level, I imagine that you have to go to the next level and keep growing just in those 6 areas. But to your point, you can't get the right people if you don't have clarity of purpose, because then those people aren't in line with your purpose.
Yeah, and I think the companies that really do a great job, I mean, that becomes how they attract the people that share those same beliefs, because they're wearing them on their sleeves. They're putting them out in their communication. They're living, these core beliefs as opposed to just, spouting them off or putting them in the company report. And I think that there was a great company in Chicago, Illinois called Threadless. And again, I'm sure some of your listeners heard of them because they have millions of customers now around the world. They essentially print T-shirts. Now they have a really interesting model where community members actually submit artwork, and then community members vote on the artwork. And whatever gets voted on and selected as the designs of the week, then those are the shirts they produce. So they, in a lot of ways, it's a great model because they know they've got a sure winner. In fact, they've never had a shirt, not sell well because the community already voted on it, and they have a pretty good idea that it's going to be a popular design. But one of the things that really struck me when I went and visited this company is the amount of employees that actually first became familiar with this organization by being a member of the community. They were either an artist or a graphic designer or had submitted art or voted on art, bought product from them, and they wanted to go to work for this company. And I think that when you see people out there in the community that want to go to work for a company, after having interactions with them, after having experienced what they believe in and who they are and what they stand for, I think that's a pretty strong testament to doing things right.
So, John, when you hear small business owners or even managers of departments say to you, I'm tired of doing the thinking for my team. I'm tired of carrying this company on my back. I'm tired of me being the only person out there front and just dragging, the rest of this organization along. I imagine you hear some of that.
Sure.
And is that what they're experiencing is that lack of commitment?
I think it is. And again, the thing about culture, it's one of those words that gets bantered around a lot in business circles. But think about culture, particularly in a small business. First off, every business has a culture because particularly in a small business, it is quite often it's really just who the owner is being is the culture. When you get to a much larger organization, obviously culture is driven by many forms of interactions with the company. But for many times, if a company owner will tell me that, say, well, the first place you have to look is to yourself. And I'm not saying it's an easy job, but you really can't you can't create a positive, healthy, vibrant culture without yourself being vibrant, healthy, positive. And I think that's the place that I think really trips people up quite often, and they don't realize the investment that they have to make in getting there, in telling the story, in finding this higher purpose so that you can communicate this higher purpose, and then obviously attracting people, but then letting them be a part of the story. I think that's, a lot of companies have a really good story that they tell out there in the public, but then you go back inside the company and they're not living that story. And I think that's a very, very key distinction.
One of the themes I picked up on in the first half of your book, which is getting that commitment inside the organization. 2 words stand out: collaboration and sharing of information. Yeah. Collaboration, sharing of information, and you kind of beat that drum over and over in some form or another. Is that 2 of the keys in getting this commitment?
Yeah, I think it really is. I mean, you think about, I don't know if you've had any situations in your work life, but imagine how many people are in organizations and they don't have any idea, what their role is. I mean, they know what their job is, but they don't have any idea what their contribution is, or nobody ever asks them what they think about, how to do something. And I think one of the things I found, a striking number of the companies that I interviewed and worked with had very collaborative planning processes. It would be an annual planning process. It might be a quarterly, like by team process, but everybody got a say. I mean, they all participated in choosing, here are going to be our priorities, for the quarter. Now, obviously you've got people that plan projects, and you've got people that do projects, and you've got people that manage projects. I mean, so people still have roles. But it's amazing how much buy-in that you get when everybody understands, how they're being measured, that they got to collaborate on, really what was the positive direction for the organization to take. there was one company that I profiled there in Fairfield, Iowa called Sky Factory. They go as far as having teams, functional teams, where the person who runs or manages the team rotates. So really nobody was in charge of all time. In fact, they were all in charge. And so, you start seeing that level of collaboration. And what they found was they just continued to improve dramatically because they weren't just left to one person's idea of how to run the team. They were constantly exposed to different new and innovative ideas that each team member was able to bring. And they just found that, I've told this story to other people, and they're thinking, gosh, doesn't that create chaos? And they found it created just the opposite. It fostered teamwork because, if you weren't the manager this month, you knew you were going to be next month. And so, everybody really was more motivated as a teammate. But I think the biggest thing that they found was all the amount of innovation that they were able to bring to every function in the company because of rotating people through and allowing them to really effectively lead.
Thanks for joining in on the conversation. Our guest is John Jantsch. We're talking about his book, The Commitment Engine, Making Work Worth It. We continue our conversation with John on how to gain commitment from everyone inside your company. One of the other aspects I found interesting in your book, you talk about teaching as a form of getting commitment. Now, I've heard of onboarding, I've heard of orientation, I've heard of training, but I've really never heard anybody talk about teaching. And so you must differentiate that at some level.
Yeah, I really do. I think you could always say there are elements of all of those things you mentioned that involve, somebody teaching something. But I think that in the companies that I really found had a lot of commitment, it was really in their DNA. I mean, everybody in the organization looked at what they did as educating. Salespeople were not, selling; they were educating. They were teaching in a way. And I think that internally they found that they fostered environments where everybody in the organization would teach everyone maybe what they did, what would help them figure out how to do something better. They had a sense of really continuing to educate their customers, before, during, and after the sale. And so in some ways it was just a kind of a way to look at interaction that was a great deal of their responsibility was to kind of continue this process of helping everyone be lifelong learners.
So how do you take what you've talked about internally in the organization and manifest it out in the marketplace where you get committed customers or committed clients? Well,
in many cases, that's comes from this, what we've been spending a lot of time talking about here, this culture. I make a statement in this book, and I've made it many times in front of large groups of business owners and marketers that your employees are quite likely treating your customers exactly like you're treating them, and so. That has a positive aspect to it too. Of course, if people feel appreciated and empowered and all the things that I think a really healthy culture can do, in many ways, they're going to take that out to the market. Now, obviously, there are things that you need to do from a process and a product and a service standpoint that's going to, and a marketing message standpoint that are going to attract or help you build a community. But it really does start with having those enthusiastic people that work for you.
John, the one piece of advice you're giving business leaders today is what?
One of the things that I would say that probably is the thread that runs through this book, and so consequently I'm using it certainly as my kind of overriding advice, and I am advising companies and managers, because you could take this to the career, all the way down to somebody's career advice, is that you've got to find and connect with a really strong, why you do what you do. What drives you, what makes you get up in the morning, what makes you want to build this business, and use that as really kind of your primary way to differentiate your business from everybody else who says they do what they do.
John, if I wanted to learn more about you and what you do, where to go find that information?
The books can be found pretty much anywhere you buy books, obviously the online stores as well as independent local bookstores. But probably as good a starting place as any is just ducttapemarketing.com, and that's TAPE marketing.com. I have a free newsletter that I put out weekly. I write blog posts almost every day. You mentioned in the intro my podcast, so we have about 6 or 8 ebooks on different topics that are free to grab. So lots of really, hopefully, useful content that we've built up over the years.
Let's go back to your first book for just a second, Duct Tape Marketing. Were you surprised at how that took off?
I think you're always surprised, maybe me more than others sometimes, with success. But, I had been out in the market talking about really the point of view of creating marketing or viewing marketing as a system and various elements of the system. I mean, I didn't sit down and write that book, because I had a great idea. I sat down and wrote that book because I'd been working with small business owners for years. And so I had a really good sense that not only what I talked about worked, but it resonated with small business owners, the concepts in it. And so, you never know how something's going to be received or talked about or found even. But I had a pretty good sense that if people picked that book up, that it was going to make sense to them.
So Duct Tape Marketing, the referral engine, and now your book, The Commitment Engine, Making Work Worth It. So when you put the 3 of those together, what's been the biggest epiphany for you after completing that body of work?
I don't know that I've had anything I would define as an epiphany. I think what I would say is it's just been a really nice evolution, both in my thinking and in my experience and really, how people have come to kind of view my work. I will say that, and I think you probably count yourself among this, I had a fair amount of people that wrote to me and said, wow, this is a really different book. From your first one, and so to be able to kind of start with real nuts and bolts and then kind of move into a referral engine that was certainly related to marketing, but got a lot more into how to be referable, and then to kind of have this third book that some people could read the first section as almost being a self-help book. It's been just a really fun evolution for me. I'm actually working on a 4th book it's going to be called, or at least is the working title, Duct Tape Selling. And I'm really going to kind of share my view that I believe, the world of the professional salesperson has changed dramatically over the last few years. And I'm going to at least attempt to teach him the fact that I think now that marketing or doing some of the things that were traditionally viewed as marketing is really the new way of selling.
Well, that's for a whole other program, John, because I think you're right on the market with that. I've told people today the convergence of marketing and selling has come together.
You betcha.
I told somebody the other day, I said, so I'm struggling on this sales call. And I said, well, tell me about it. And then after I listened to him, I said, well, because you're making a marketing call. You're not at the selling part yet. It's a marketing call. Yeah. But when I said that to the person, it like resonated with them. Oh, there is a difference between making a marketing call and making a sales call. But that's for a future program.
Yep.
But I believe I'll look forward to that book because I think you're right on target there. So, John, any last thoughts for our audience before we go tonight?
Well, spend some time. I mean, if this idea of purpose really starts, if you start to feel like, hey, I need to investigate that, really, whether you get my book or you really just, I've probably written about, if you look at my website, you'll find some things I've written about that. But really, take that idea to heart. Give yourself some space to really a day even, to really kind of contemplate why you're doing what you're doing. I had somebody ask me or tell me about a great question that somebody asked them that really kind of hit them between the eyes of, whether or not they were doing something that was meaningful with their business. And they said, would sit and think about, would anybody care if your business didn't exist anymore? Mm-hmm. And, that's sort of a harsh question. But, if you think about it and you don't really have a bunch of people that work for you or a bunch of people that are customers that you're making a difference in their lives that would miss you if you were gone, then, maybe you ought to reevaluate what it is you're doing.
I think good advice. John, thanks for being on the program.
All righty.
This or other BizTalk podcasts may be downloaded by visiting our website, BizTalkRadioShow.com, or you can subscribe to BizTalk through iTunes. Follow us on Twitter at BizTalk1040 and like us on Facebook. If you want to learn the strategies finding and getting performance out of A-player salespeople, contact Performance Group by calling 800-950-9509 or visit us on the web at pmgllc.net. This has been your host, Jim Lobaito.